thought what we could do today is, what I'd like to do is start talk a little bit about my background, and something that may be of interest to you even now, what business I'm involved in and looking for money. But also, people always want to talk about Marvel. I think we can get into Marvel. Like some, we talk a little bit about our podcast if we have time. I'm happy to take questions from all of you at any time. Don't have to wait for the end. I don't mind at all. And I will stay for the next 3 hours talking if you want to. It's really going to be up to you. So first, a little bit about my background. I grew up in Flushing, Queens, here in New York City. I went to public high school, Flushing High. I got a degree upstate at Alfred University in ceramic engineering. Alfred is south of Rochester in the middle of nowhere. And it is the #1 school in the world for ceramic science, technology, engineering, and ceramic art, all things. And then I went to work briefly in fiberglass factory for almost going fiberglass as a quality control engineer. And in that year after I graduated, I realized I didn't want to be an engineer. And so I went to the U.S. Navy. My family history of officers in the Navy and wars. My father was a Navy officer in the South Pacific and in Korea. I guess you could say tried to follow in his footsteps. So I did 2 tours in the Vietnam War. I was on the guided missile destroyer off of North Vietnam. I was a comm officer on 1 tour and a damage control officer on another. And this was one of the turning points of my life, as you can imagine, the experience. I was very naive. I watched too many John Wayne black and white movies on TV when I was growing up, and I obviously wasn't anything like that. But that's where I really first started to learn about leadership. I had the privilege of serving under some great officers. There's always a few that aren't so great, but I was very blessed, and serving with some great enlisted, senior enlisted people as well, some of whom reported to me. My day consists of saying from chief to ranking next. I got my commission not at Annapolis, but in a 4-month program called Officers Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. And because I was in the top 10% of the class, I could sort of pick my assignment, and I picked destroyers in the Pacific, and our home port was Pearl Harbor. But that was really, I think, that overall experience, the start for me in leadership. They offered me a regular commission. This is the commission that the people from Annapolis get. I did love the Navy, and when you love something, you just naturally I could do well. And my wife of 9 months, now my wife of 53 years, we're still going strong. I was thrilled when I told her great news was going to make the Navy a career. Her exact words were, "You stay in and we're divorced." And what had happened is that we had been in dry dock for a while in Pearl Harbor, so she got to know some of the other wives of the officers on the ship. The ship had 300 sailors, 20 officers. It's a big ship, a destroyer. And they had told her, listen, if your husband decides to stay in, he's going to be what the Navy calls, and still calls, surface warfare officer, and he's going to be at sea 6 months a year. You're going to raise the kids alone. And that was accurate, actually. And I loved my wife more than the Navy, so I went back to the ship and told the captain who had brought this opportunity to me, I'm not going to stay in. Here's why. And he said to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know. I get a master's degree in something. And he said to me, you should go to Harvard Business School. He had just gotten his doctorate from Harvard Business School. The Navy is, and still today, is very good about education for officers. And to be honest, I did not see myself as an Ivy leader. I grew up in Queens, a middle-class family. My father was a lieutenant in the New York City Fire Department. My mother was an EMT for 30 years. So I grew up in an environment of give back, which which I didn't think about until much later in life. We lived in a brick house connected to all the other houses up and down the street. And that was fun. So going to the Ivy League, much less Harvard, was not in my mind. And I was lacking in confidence, but I wasn't making that leap. And the captain said to me, words I still think about every day. Although I didn't take him seriously at the time. He said to me, Cuneo, you don't know how good you are. And I thought he's just being nice to me. So long story short, I was accepted into Harvard Business School. And I found out because I was much older back then, like in 1971, basically the students, 80% of them came directly from the graduate school. And here I was a guy who had been in a war for 3.5 years, and et cetera, et cetera. So class participation, which you graded on, just had some, I guess things sounded a little bit better when I said them than the other kids. So I had academic honors and president of the International Business Club, and that's when I started to really bloom in a sense. So my career has been consumer products, media and entertainment. I have had turnarounds and service on public boards. I've been on public boards for 38 years. I've done 7 turnarounds. Marvel is the one that gets most attention, but I've done 3 in Europe and 3 others here in the United States. I think the last, now since COVID, I've been in tech actually. So out of entertainment, out of media and consumer products. But whatever's interesting to me, that sort of seems to happen. And today I'm chairman of 3 companies, which I'll describe briefly, 2 of which are looking for money right now. The first is an AI-based company doing digital twinning based in San Francisco. What we do is basically digital twinning for interior spaces in the commercial real estate business. We are on the verge of depression in commercial real estate globally. And what's going to save the industry is repurposing space that has been left behind for a lot of reasons, mostly COVID, and left in very poor shape by the way. And so owners and managers are trying to find other uses and people to rent or buy these spaces. And they don't want to spend the capital to clean them up, so it's tough. So what we do very simply is from CAD or from a blueprint, we can create a 3D digital reproduction, if you will, of the space. And what we do is a white box, so you don't see any of the junk, because we're looking for blueprints. And so we also, and this is where the AI comes in, with a touch of a button, we can show the space as retail, restaurant, warehouse, if it makes sense, med tech, and on and on and on. So if you're in New York and you've got a space you want to do something with, you have somebody calling you from London, you're not going to fly in to see a junkyard, but you can show them, a dream of what can really happen. We have unique technology, no one else is close. We have a big lead, and right now demand is 10 times what we can provide. So I'm not looking right now for money. It's not a lot of money, we're talking about a couple $1 million. Though if someone came in with 10 million, we might go for that. But it's all about just increasing the headcount, basically. So we're very excited. I'm there. I'm going to make a crazy statement and say we have the potential to be a unicorn here. My second potential for a unicorn is a very different company I'm chairman of. It's a company called Oxio. It's engaged in nanotechnology. The company is based in London. Actually manufacture, of all places, in Serbia, which actually is quite business friendly and a very interesting place to do business, and so on. So nanotechnology, what is nanotechnology? Some of you may know that nano literally means very small. this is basically technology that treats elements, in our case it's carbon, both chemically and physically, to completely create new atomic and molecular structures. So long story short, we have a magic black powder that basically has uses for 40 industries. Once again, this is another, the demand is at least 10x. I have orders for the next 3 years that we can't fill. In one factory, we need 6. There's nobody close to us. We're completely protected. Technology and everything else. But very quickly, I'll give you just what we're doing real fast to start. Lithium-ion batteries. So, science has known for a long time that if you replace the carbon, the anode is where the energy comes out of the battery. Cathode is where you charge it. You change the anode is primarily carbon, big charcoal inside. If you replace that with silicon, and we're talking about silicon dioxide, going back to my ceramic days. This is sand, so just clean sand. You can increase the energy density of the back of the battery by twice. So an EV that's advertised that can go 300 miles without a charge could do 600 now by putting silicon in with 1% of our magic power. The real reason, though, that the EV industry wants this is not to advertise and go further. One of the hidden problems with EVs is weight. So the battery packs in an automobile increase the weight of the car by 30 to 40% over the equivalent car with an internal combustion engine. And the cars are wearing out faster. Have any of you heard friends who have Teslas complaining that the tires wear out very quickly? Okay, well now you know why. A hell of a lot more weight. And all of that weight has to, in friction with the ground and so on. So the problem, however, with the silicon is it grows 4x when it's energized, so of course the battery would blow. But when you mix it with our powder magic is the strength of steel, 10 times steel, and it conducts electricity very well. And if you look at an electron microscope, you'll see a tube that's 1 atom thick all the way around. And when you mix this in, it actually binds the silicon molecules so they can't expand. So we're now going everybody wants the products. We've been testing for 3 years. We're going strong right now with that. Another quick use, there are 30 other industries that want our product. Another use, in the tires. If in the treads, just the treads of the tire, you mix in our product, well, as I said, the tires wear longer, first of all. And second of all, they're highly conductive. Another hidden problem with automobiles in general is static electricity. All these things are rubbing inside the car, and you need to ground that static electricity. The way static electricity is grounded today is through the tires. We all know tires are not good conductors. So you're forcing the static electricity. Now with our conductive material in the just in the tread you have. So anyway, I'll get off of that, but we're very excited. Our plan, we build a second factory in Serbia, 2 in Luxembourg, where we're headquartered. If any of you have been to Luxembourg, you know it is a beautiful place, very business oriented, and very well put together and run, and so on. And then the next 2 will be in the U.S. So, real quick, but again, I have to say, a potential unicorn. And then the final one I'm chairman of is a NASDAQ company. It's a med tech company that has a non-invasive treatment for migraine headaches, cluster headaches, and PTSD. And the way it works is you hold the device on your vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the most important nerve in your body. It goes from all of your major organs up both sides of your neck. And the device is radio frequency. There are no side effects. You don't have to take a pill. You don't have to take a shot. And you hold it 2 minutes against your vagus nerve. 2 minutes at night, 2 minutes in the morning. 50% of people with migraine headaches have complete relief. 30% have partial relief, and 20% don't have any relief. Although I do think part of that percent is people are not using the product properly. Although it's not complex at all to use, we're actually very simple. This was a turnaround. The turnaround is done. I've announced publicly, public companies is allowed there. I'm not telling you anything, that I'm leaving the company as chairman in a year. I want to give the company a chance to figure out who to replace me and what they want to do. But for me, when the turnaround is done, it's time to go. It's always been that way. We've done turnarounds, but I've lasted an average of 3 years on a turnaround. And then I get bored, and I would screw up the company. I got to get out. That's really the way it works. So this company is doing very well. ECOR is a designator on NASDAQ, just starting to really explode now. And we have a consumer company. What I just described to you is the RX, the doc prescribing. We have over-the-counter product now. It's doing super well. To be blunt, it's the same product. Just don't make the same claims. We make wellness claims, which we're allowed to do. It's the same product. It's booming. And the latest, our biggest client is, our biggest customer is the VA hospitals in the United States for, I think, very obvious reasons. But we've only penetrated 6% of VA hospital right now, growing, at 100% order. That's public knowledge. I'm not telling you anything you can't read. Also, now we have Air Force and Army Special Forces are using the product. They test it without telling us. They test the product and have tremendous results. And you see the results in terms of stress reduction, in terms of being able to concentrate for longer periods of time. I'll leave it with one little anecdote. So picture yourself in a darkened room at an Air Force base just north of Las Vegas. You're surrounded by the desert. There's a big scope that you're looking at 8 hours a day. And you're air controlling. What are you air controlling? You're air controlling a Predator drone in Afghanistan, and you're looking for targets. Pretty stressful, needless to say. And some of the operators so bad they would take uppers during the day and downers when they came off shift. And now they're using our product. Some of them, we actually had situations where on those drones, the guys car accidents driving home and got killed. They were just in no shape. So very excited again about equal public company. We're not looking for any capital. I'm on the board of the National Archives in Washington. I've been on 13 years. We have 22 billion documents, all the records of the United States government. I highly recommend if you go to Washington, you must go to the archives. It's a great place to visit, where you can see the Constitution, the Declaration, the Bill of Rights, etc., as well as many other items. It's great. We're doing very well there too. And I have a podcast we started this year. It's called The Essentials of Superhero Leadership. A little bit of a story going back about now over 20 years. I was asked to give a speech on leadership. I'm a CEO of Marvel. We were doing well. And I had never really thought much about my leadership, actually, amazingly, for leadership. But I said yes. I had an 11-hour non-stop flight to China. I was getting on the flight, and I was thinking, what the heck am I going to say to this big crowd about leadership? And something happened. I was kind of in a trance for 9 of the 11 hours. And I came up with what I call 28 essentials for leadership. And I've added 4 in 20 years. So it's now 32 essentials for super. And if you go to my website, petercuneo.com, you can see all of this. And so, and you can read the essentials, which are one-liners. 32 of them, read the whole thing in 3 minutes. And grade yourself on how you think you do. I certainly still grade myself. I wish I could give myself all A's, but I some things on that, the best I'm ever going to be is a C, and it's hard because of my many personality flaws. But some things that make me good at doing turnarounds don't make me good as a husband. We'll get into that later. But being impatient is great in turnarounds. It's not so good in other relationships. Anyway, the podcast, I interview proven leaders. Some are names you would know, some are names you wouldn't know necessarily, but I think the interviews are very interesting. I get people I talk to talk about their failures, talk about how they learn leadership, starting as a young person, very young, talk about some of their successes, but they're very candid and very open, and I think that's a good thing. And so I'm enjoying that. We're going to start season 2 shortly. Question, yes?
Might be a good time for this. You mentioned earlier that your leadership style was greatly influenced by your time at war. So I'm from a very different generation. How do you advise folks who have not gone to war to balance? I imagine that there's a nuance between authoritativeness and collaboration and things like that that you can greatly benefit from in those.
Great question. So one of the topics I cover in some of my speeches is the following. It's my opinion that we have less good leadership in the world than maybe ever in human history. Now I know that's an extra big statement, but certainly we all would agree. We all agree that I don't care, just turn to you. This is not a right-left issue. This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. I'm talking about globally, whatever. We are lacking in leadership. It's so obvious. And one of the problems we have as young people are not learning leadership. Why? And that's what I talk about. What's wrong and what can you do as a parent, as a grandparent, or for yourself to learn leadership? Because we can learn. When I learn leadership, I'm going to hear something from one of you today that I'm going to remember about leadership. That I'm going to learn something. So this is something we get into a lot. I have a list of 15 items that if you go to petercuneo.com, I recommend for young people to learn leadership. And I'm defining young as 30 and under. And I bet you will all have horror stories about young people you've hired from very good schools, Ivy leaguers in some cases, that couldn't last a day at work. Couldn't last a day, could not take. Today the kids are, it's not that they're thin skinned, they have no skin. Because they've grown up in a world in many cases where overparenting is a huge problem. The problems basically are, how do we learn leadership? And how do we become good leaders? First of all, we have to learn as human beings, our strengths and our weaknesses. We all have them. We're all flawed by definition. But we become wise when we know what our strengths are, and with our weaknesses, we can make 2 choices: avoid or to get better, whatever is appropriate. Kids today don't learn their strengths and weaknesses. They think life is just. I interviewed someone, a well-known law firm here on Pillsbury, asked me to interview some of their people coming out of law schools to work for the company, just something different, see what I thought. And I was appalled. And I had, they just talked in the interviews like, I will be, there's no question, I will be a partner in 7 years and a managing partner in 17 years or whatever the right thing is. There was no doubt, they weren't arrogant, it was more like, oh, this is just how life works. I have a million more stories that I'm not going to get into. We all know the trophies. Everyone gets a trophy.
So how can people build grit? It sounds like they're lacking grit.
Correct. So the question is, how do they, exactly, the way we learn leadership, the way we learn our strength, there's only really one way, true way. And that is face-to-face human communication with a diversity of people, a diversity of professional, personal situations, geographic diversity situations. If you think about young people now, well, the internet's your enemy. face and they read shit that people say to them, they never say to your face. And unfortunately, kids commit suicide on this. It's horrible. Because no one taught them, and this is crap. These people are full of shit. You know? I mean, so it's face-to-face, and my list is a lot of that. Face-to-face. So, and sometimes when I first gave a list, a bunch of them really got it off. The audience looked at me like you're crazy. One of them is, let your kids fail. Very simple. Let your kids fail, yes, sir.
Have you ever explored or investigated further young people speaking in text? In other words, they don't know how to complete sentences, they don't know how to complete thoughts, they just hit you with a short.
Yeah, the short interviews, yeah. So there's a lot of problems. It's a Zoom call, you're not gonna learn anything about leadership from anybody who's on the other end. You're just not. Because body language, I get as much from body language to return as I do from actually what you say.
I want to just emphasize your comment about, I have a 12-year-old, everybody not getting a trophy. I tell my daughter all the time, coming in second is just being the first loser.
And it's good for you. You know, I have a 16-year-old grandson, he goes to a private school, they just did the thing with phones, and he says to me, it's unbelievable, the change. Everyone talks to each other. Everyone goes to lunch together and talks to each other.
So you know they take
They take them away.
They take them away.
Yeah.
They give them
And
back.
that's a growing trend.
The only thing I don't like though is my daughter's too young, but I think the high schoolers are allowed to go out to lunch, and they don't give them their phone to go out to lunch. I think they should have it in New York City when they're out of the building.
That's fine.
What?
Let him go.
I like to know where she is. But
Well, but that's the thing, then she knows that you know. If they don't have that, you know.
yeah, but she also knows she's not allowed to go east of Park Avenue, so she knows if I find out.
So let's
And I also told her, by the way, I said, don't think I need a phone to track you. I can put an Apple AirTag in your backpack. But the phone can go away.
So one of my statements I make is that kids who are 4 or 5 years old can start to learn leadership. 4 or 5 years old. And of course, the audience used to go, you're crazy. What are you talking about? My kid doesn't even know what leadership means or the word. I would say one of the great attributes of proven great leaders is they are not thrown when surprises hit them. And negative surprises in particular, they dive at problems. You really see it. You see it in the people that I interview. It's one of the common traits. So I said, take your 5-year-old to Europe. We'll go on a week's vacation to a country that does not speak English. If they go to where they speak English, that's cheating. Go. Okay, here's what happens. Your 5-year-old comes home, and it's emotional. 5-year-old is thinking, we went to this place, I forgot the name. I didn't understand anything anyone said. The food was completely different, but I liked it. Mom, Dad, where are we going next year? They're starting to get comfortable jumping to alien, what I call alien environments. There's good alien and bad alien. But in this case, I'm talking good alien. And they have to have these experiences regularly, not just once a year. And I say some said, I can't afford to go to Europe. And I said, okay, go to Quebec. Can't afford Quebec, go to West Virginia. By the way, one of the things on my list is kids have to see poverty. 90% of the world is in poverty. They can't grow up in this ivory town. They can't. You have to give them those experiences to get a perspective. And let them go and build habitats for humanity. 13 teenagers, great. So I have a long list of things. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're on the. If you go to Peter Cuneo, you'll see this.
Talking about bigger kids, like you're a turnaround expert, is there a certain amount of commonality when you walk into these situations of companies that really have messed up and all that you find hubris and stuff like that? Like, is it something that you can get a smell test when you walk in and say?
No. So question I often get is, how do you decide which turnaround you're going to take? Okay? And so what I like to do is, first of all, talk to people who know the company, including people that don't work there. And I can do that. I get into the particular industry like with other people, with competitors. And we will have, someone introduces us to someone else for a company. We can do it. I try to read as much as written about the company as well, which is often misleading, but it's an input, and so on. And so I try to really get a feeling. And of course, I'll look at the industry. When I went to Marvel, I didn't know a thing about making a movie or publishing a comic book. Not a thing. But what actually got me to go to Marvel was, in bankruptcy, Marvel had 7,000 characters. Okay, yeah, the A list is 10 characters. I get that. The B list is 20. But 7,000 characters. And in bankruptcy, the entire IP portfolio was valued at $500 million. I knew that Spider-Man could be at $500 million alone. And I didn't know anything, but I know the character. So I was very interested to go there. And we'll talk a little bit about going to turnarounds, I think. So when I go into turnarounds, first thing I've learned the hard way is it's always worse than you think it is on the outside. First couple I did, oh man, I'm an expert, I do all this research, I talk to people, I go in and it's 4 times worse than I heard. And then after a while I knew to expect that. It was just going to be the unexpected. There's no way from the outside I can know everything. And so, and secondly, I think on all I like to say, the single biggest problem with these turnarounds is not what you may think. It was the culture of the company. The value system of the company was completely backwards in many cases. It was always flawed. You might argue the company was bankrupt culturally. And so you're going to find that. And then you have to change it. The hardest, in my opinion, the hardest job of a leader is changing culture and making changes. Hard decisions that are going to make a lot of people very unhappy, even though they may not be affected directly negatively. Change scares human beings. Big change scares you. It's just natural. It's the way we're made up. So I think, so what I tried to do is really get into what was wrong with the culture, why, and who in the company is going to make the trip with me or not. And I think that this is not hard, actually. I don't doubt that any of you could have gone into the companies that I've been in and figured out pretty quickly the culture. The problem is changing the culture. That's the hard part. So at Marvel, I have to say that I influenced the change in the culture, but the culture was actually not very bad at Marvel. The biggest problem was the company had just come out of bankruptcy after a 2-year fight between Carl Icahn and Ike Perlmutter. And everyone believed, including outside investors, we were New York Stock Exchange company, the public company. We were going to go bankrupt again in 6 months. So the culture was very defensive. And was, where do I get another job before this place blows up? And so that wasn't too hard to spot right away. And so you go through it. I think, but the culture became, and I'll take some credit, but actually made a fabulous board. I'll talk about boards hopefully if we have a little time. In that case, I inherited a really good board. And the reason the culture became this, very simple. We're going to change the rules of the game. We're not going to make movies the way Hollywood did. We're not going to publish comic books the way other people do. And I'll give you some examples now. You talk about, okay, wait a minute, what are some examples of, say, movies? Well, part of it was how we cast. So, everyone will remember X-Men 1, 2000. Yeah, 2000. Wolverine was a guy named Hugh Jackman. No one ever heard of Hugh Jackman. He was a song and dance man who had had a couple of hits in London, musicals. He made 2 tiny independent films in Australia that no one ever heard of. And of course, Hollywood called the company and said, well, you gotta put a big star in that role, and he will make the movie. Just because he's a big star. That's another Hollywood myth, that any one person can make a movie. It's impossible, male or female. So we were more interested in having what I would say to these agents on all our films. We only want to have good actors and actresses. They're going to be behind a mask most of the time, and frankly, the lead is the character. It's not the person playing the character. And Hugh Jackman has been phenomenally successful. He's out in a movie right now, 24 years later, as Wolverine, okay, with Deadpool. He had 3 hits on Broadway. 3 hits on Broadway during the past 20 years. Another example would be what we did for Iron Man 1, Tony Stark. Okay, who did we cast as Tony Stark? Robert Downey Jr. So I'm going to describe a scene to you that actually happened. I'm now on the board. I finished almost 4 years as CEO, and vice chairman. And we started our own studio. Another, what? Marvel is going to have their own studio? They're not going to work with the big studios anymore? Impossible. Nobody could possibly do that. And one of my jobs as vice chair was to do investor relations. All of them thought we were crazy to start our own studio. And I kept explaining why and why we could do it better. They weren't buying it. We're going to have to prove it. So the first film, we raised $525 million. Gave away no equity for the studio. And so it was all bank debt and a little bit of mess. And no one else could ever do this again because we had at the time the #1 track record in the history of film as measured by average worldwide box office. It wasn't even close. And so we had the power to do that, but we never happened. Anyway, so we have Marvel Studios. And okay, the first film is going to be Iron Man, our own film, and we got too well. And so, of course, Tony Stark, Iron Man, who are we going to cast? So we're sitting in a board meeting in New York, and the guys running Marvel Studios. By the way, Marvel Studios, 25 people instead of thousands. Came in and said, well, we're going to cast the best male actor. And wow, yeah, okay. Who is it? Robert Downey Jr. And it's like, what? This mugshot was 2 months ago all over. Are you guys insane? Did we put the wrong guys in charge of Marvel Studios? You guys are taking that change the rules of the game a little too seriously. So what they had done is they said, we thought you could. So I said, yeah, Robert, the screen test. And the screen test is the first 7 minutes of the film. He's in a Humvee, smoking a cigarette, he's got a cocktail, he's quipping with a lady, female driver in camo. And they're in Afghanistan. And so he's right on the script for the first 3 or 4 minutes, and then it was only Robert can do. He goes off. He just goes off. And he becomes Tony Stark. And I mean, we still think he actually has the same personality as Tony Stark, even today. And the lights come on, and here's the board, including me. Do it. And the rest is history. Oh, by the way, who just got the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor? Tony Stark. Correct. So, we were always going to do things like that. Those are stories that people could relate to. We got 1 million of those stories, but we just wouldn't give in. We wouldn't do things that other people did, which were crazy. And most of the board were not in that world, so we could look at it and see, the studio's spending what on what? What? Every senior exec has a Lamborghini on the company? What? No, it wasn't going to happen. So, we never were going to what people call go Hollywood. But I think that was really the success that Marvel had, because we just weren't going to give in. it's true of all turnarounds, you're going to have to do some things differently. So you come in, talk about, let's see, what are some of the things that I told you about? Here's a company, they're new products. They're big, they sell to retailers, mass retailers mostly. Their products, any 25% of the line has to be new products every year. Coming great, okay, well, the new products are exciting, I like new products. The people in the new products department, they're the worst people in the company. And you have your worst people on what's the most important in the company. And so, I said, so, how do you change? And so there are a number of ways. One is I created a committee, a new products committee, where I was the chairman. And so the company was multinational, but was very U.S.-centric, so all the new product ideas in the U.S. were fine. They could be forced on the rest of the world, but the rest of the world, when they had a good idea in that, wasn't good, or volumes were too little, whatever. First time I said, no, we're taking that idea from the UK, I love it. We're going, well, what? You just see the faces in the room. They're like, what? Talk about changing culture. It takes time. Not going to be one instant. And so, so we finally had a big hit on a new product, and I was having a meeting, some multinational companies, with 200 people in the room, employees, and people tuning in, ready from 10 time zones where they could. And before the meeting, I said, I want to give checks to the following 7 people. They're all different function areas that have been on that new product, which has been a big success. I want to give them checks in front of their peers in the room. And the head of HR said to me, well, Peter, you really can't do that because there'll be other people who think they deserve a check for something. Okay, so I said, well, we're going to make some changes in the way people think. Needless to say, he was gone a month later. So I called up, giving this talk, podium, and pulled up these 7 people. They're like, whoa, they don't even know why they're going up. I give them checks and talk about the new product, really help the company, turn around. Checks were tiny, $100. $100. What really mattered was they got touted in front of their peers, with people from all around the world at least listening, if not watching. And guess what? 6 months later, the best people all wanted to make new products. I had no problem making the changes. And new products was part of the big success we had over the coming years. I've been to companies where their attitude towards the customer was the customer is stupid, and we can put anything over on them. I know this sounds incredible. I mean, like, that can't be, right? Nobody can be that bad. Guess what? I run into it twice. Okay. So, culture. Culture is also how we treat each other. So that's a part of it also. One company I'm at, we had 2 female vice presidents. I'm on the job about a month. One day they knock on the door, ask if they can come in my office. And I can tell they're very nervous. Long story short, they sit down. They tell me that their boss is sexually harassing. I'm not going to go into the detail of what exactly, but it was ridiculous. And so I got after they left, a couple hours later, I invited this guy in, and I sort of pretended that, hey, these ladies are good, they're pretty good looking. And he admitted the whole thing to me. Now, this particular guy was actually had a global reputation. He was not the head of the thing. He was involved in research. He had a global reputation. Considered very heavy. I fired him on the spot. On the spot. He was in shock. Okay, now, do you think that didn't change the culture? Because everyone knew what he was doing in the company. There's no secrets in the company. Please always remember that. Everything gets around. There's no such thing as secrets. Sooner or later. So what do you thought about me and about how we would treat each other. So, there's just a few war stories, so to speak. I got real war stories too, but I don't want to take up too much time. But I think if you're going to go into a turnaround, do as much research as you can. And here's the other thing: it's going to be stressful. Don't think you're above the stress. I have 2 stents in my heart right now. I've had them for 13 years. So what happened was I had a stress test. I didn't think I had any problems at all. I thought, it's been 10 years I'll have one, but they won't find anything. Next day I'm having an angioplasty. And I have 2 stents, including the Widowmaker, which was completely blocked. You all know anything about hearts. So after I told my cardiologist, I said, I don't get it. I'm completely, I have no symptoms. I've never taken drugs. I don't drink to excess. I looked at a list. My grandparents all lived in the late 80s and 90s. And he said, Peter, you have problems with your gums and plaque. I said, yeah, actually, I've had a couple of operations. My brushing doesn't help. I said, it's stress. No, send plaques in your heart. Your problem is stress.
I have a question, and it's a practical question. It's clear that you need to be an excellent leader in order to manage a turnaround in a big corporation. The other thing that you need to be great at is listening to people. So my question relates on the process. Once you are retained by the board in order to restructure the business, how does the process work? How do you identify the bigger pain points, or the most important pain points of the business, and how do you prioritize when you're thinking about designing and implementing the strategy to actually implement the turnaround?
Right. So, in my case, I just talk to people of all levels all the time. Whether it's the board, even people outside the company that are critics of the company. I'll even talk to competitors. I'm not giving anything away, of course, but I want to hear all the inputs. One of the things I also like to do is, for the direct reports, when I first come on the job, I ask them to come and spend an hour with me one-on-one and tell me, what's wrong with the company and what would they do if they were me. And you learn a lot about people because the responses can be very different. And very quickly, I can almost begin to tell who's going to stick around and who needs to go, just from that experience alone. Got to talk. Communications are, I think, an undervalued skill that leaders need. We really need them. We need them in any leadership job, particularly in turnarounds. And someone came in and walked around for a day with me, and when they wrote the article, they called my leadership style as leadership by walking around. I didn't have people come to my office. I'd go to their office, or just walk around between the cubicles and start talking to people about, pet, things like that. The other thing I did, which sort of became famous, was I would have pizza parties. So, 10 people, all different functions, all different levels, and for an hour. And obviously we're serving pizza, and I would talk about the business and what we're going to do, and I would leave time for questions. And they were disciples. I knew that when they left the room, 10 people were going to be calling around saying what I said. And some of them might get a little wrong, but I was willing to live with that. Almost like a party game. So I had that form of communication as well as the formal meetings. And
How do you do that?
What happened? Yes, go ahead.
How do you create culture when the people aren't in the office? How do you do that walk around?
That is a very tough question, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't had to face that challenge.
Okay, so the organization brought people back.
Emotionally, I can tell you what I want to do, but I might pull the whole place up. I have everyone come in quite a little. And by the way, I talked about we learn leadership by interaction, face to face. Working at home is horrible. And I'd have to say, I'm not going to hire people who will willing to come in the office. It's just going to be what it's going to have to be. Because I think it's a competitive advantage.
But it's years later, and people are still probably 3 days in.
It's changing though, slowly.
It's slow.
Amazon is in trouble right now. They're getting a lot of heat because
Yeah.
they've said everyone comes in every day. I think it's a tough decision. That's leadership. That's leadership. Now look, if you took the job and you have a certain issue that you need to be home a couple of days, I can't believe they're going to fire you. I mean, but for new employees.
Another question, have you ever fired a client? Was anyone-
Fired a client, you mean a customer?
Yeah.
That is a good question. Yeah, I can't think of, usually I'm desperate for sales. Particularly at the beginning. Yes, sir.
Have you ever led a turnaround for a company that you had a significant personal investment in?
Of course.
A lot of these situations you're talking about, it's like one thing to be incentive on a turnaround, so thing to have your own capital, and I'm sure you have, but I just.
Well, I never had my own
How did that
capital
change?
in, I never had my own capital in on day one.
Okay, that's what I
Oh,
mean,
no.
I get you.
Oh, no. As I said, it's always worse than you think it is. And my wife would tell you, sometime in the first 6 months on every turnaround, I had a sleepless night and I said the following to her, honey, I think I made a really big career blunder. It all worked out. Believe it, I was talking about stress. And when you're hiring people, here's the other thing, and doing these turnarounds, you have to find people who are going to be comfortable in that environment of unknown environment, an environment of uncertainty. And most people are not. Most people are normal. The people I'm looking for are like me. They're abnormal. No, I'm very serious. And I have made mistakes hiring people I thought would fit, but just didn't. They couldn't hack it. I went back to Pepsi-Cola and other big companies and did great. But that particular kind of situation, the one thing about it is you can make a lot of money if you're successful. And that's what most of these people can afford. They're okay with the risk. But if you're successful, there's lots of nice offers. Yes?
So, I know in most of your experience, or like all your experience actually like in corporate and something for profit. So I was wondering if you ever had the chance, or if you would consider like leaving from over for not for profit, and how would you do it?
I've actually have several experiences with that. It's harder because no one's getting paid. You can't fire them. And so on. But I mentioned I'm on the board of the National Archives in Washington. And when I first went on 13 years ago, the board was all basically DC-based lawyers and grandames of DC. Very nice people. Want diversity? No, the absolute opposite of diversity. And therefore, the thinking. I was one of the first people with a different background. And so over time, we brought in, and you know some of the names. Some are personalities, some are not, but you still know the last names because they're extremely wealthy families. Over time, we just improved the word and the thinking of the word changed. What have you. Couldn't happen day one. It really could. And then we weren't good at raising money. And so we brought in people who were good at raising money. Those changes were more subtle. They weren't dramatic changes per se. So, I'm on the board of the National Policing Institute in Washington. This is not a police fraternal organization. This is an organization that does independent research to improve policing. And I was the first non-policing professional to go on the board. And this is four years ago. So they had very auspicious people from policing, ex-police chiefs of these major cities, things like that, people from academia, who do this stuff. I was the first one. And the first thing I said is you have to change the name. And the first vote was 11-1 against me. I knew it wouldn't be easy. And because raising money was hard with our name, looked like, I won't go into what the old name was, looked like a police fraternal organization. And people didn't want to give. Big corporations don't want to do anything that hasn't tainted police, not because they're necessarily anti-police, it's just too controversial. Okay, think of it, think about it. Your companies give to a police, thing. It's one thing if you're an individual, but very hard. So now today we have 21 board members and 10 are non-policing. Have you know some of the names? Yes.
How do you pick where you're going to spend your time today, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit?
It's a very good question. I needed to be very old to even answer that. I think it's a combination of two factors. One is a lot of friends call and say, help, please. That's how I got on the Archives Board. That's how I got on the National Policing Institute Board. That's how I got involved in the E-Corps, the turnaround with the treatment for migraine headaches. Because we're all friends and said, help. Can you please help? But also they were interesting, right? These are very interesting organizations. These are not. And so that's sort of almost happenstance in a way. The way I got to Marvel was I had done a turnaround before that, a comic called Remington. This is not the guns, this is the shavers. Okay? And we had had a huge success for years. And one of the owners, who I made $100 million for in 3 years, took over Marvel in bankruptcy. His name's Ike Perlmutter, his biggest shareholder in Disney. He's certainly well-known and right-wing. He was the first Jewish member at Mar-a-Lago. The Trump led it, and so on. And quite an interesting personality. But did a lot of good things. And I had made him $100 million. And so when he took over, Marvel called me, Peter, I need a CEO. I told him I don't know anything about movies or TV or comics or video games, any of the stuff we got into. So, I do think one other thing I wanted to go back to. I think you need, after a certain amount of time, because in the end, it's all about leadership is about strategy. Tactics matter, but it's really about strategy. And I think that you're going to want to look at the strategy, and usually there is no strategy in these turnarounds. It's not that you have to change it, there isn't any. And decide how you're going to do it. And I always had sort of visual clues that I would get. So my visual clue at Marvel, after about 6 months of learning now, I'm learning the business, is the following. And I think this would work for any turnaround. In fact, it would work for any business. It would work for any nonprofit. It would work, doesn't matter. So what I had in my head was a wagon wheel. And the hub of the wagon wheel was our IP, 7,000 characters. But in another business, it could be your physical assets. It doesn't have to be intangible assets. Physical assets, whatever you can do. Okay? That's the hub of the wheel. The spokes are how you monetize those assets. So when I started Marvel, we only had 1.5 spokes. We had a comic book business, and we had a very sketchy licensing business. That was my head. I had a very shaky wheel and walked away with 1.5 spokes. So after 3 months, I did a big deal on video games for some of the majors, so now we had 2.5 spokes. And then the next year came X-Men 1, it was a gigantic hit, we had the movie spoke. So now we had 3.5, and well, and the broken spoke was fixed because licensing movies, all these other things go together. So now we have 4 strong spokes after 2 years. And that's, you know, when we sold to Disney, we had like 20 spokes. Many years later, 20 spokes. But you can use that in your head. And the rim, which is actually most important, is the synergy between all the spokes. If you went to a Marvel movie, you buy the toys for your kid. Oh yeah, that was another big spoke, toys. Okay? Or you might play the video games. Or get into the comic books. They all fed each other. Because there was a world, Marvel world. And so they strengthened each other because of the rim. Yes?
What do you consider, I was talking to another people about risks in business. What do you consider the biggest risks in business? I'll tell you what I do. What I think of is lack of succession planning or lack of clarity around maybe next gen, especially with family offices. What are your thoughts on that? Any of those issues?
Okay, a lot of questions. I'm actually on Thursday, I'm in Montreal for a family office. Just 10 in a room with me. They wanted to talk to me about their charges. Well, it's about their business, not Quebec, but yes. But the statistics show that something like after 2 generations, 50% of family wealth is gone.
Sure.
And after 3 generations, 90% is gone. Now, we all know the names of the rich that have been rich forever, but they're very, very rare. You don't think of them as rare, but they are. So I think it's very hard, and where you have multiple family members involved in business, it's very hard. It's an extra layer of difficulty for obvious reasons. Yeah, I mean, there's difference of opinion, there's family emotions you don't normally have to cope with it, in a regular turnaround situation. I think it's very hard. But I have not actually ever had that problem on anything I've done. I do think I think leadership and so on. And it's not a matter of money because we see all these families that have tons of money have tremendous stress with who's taking over. I don't have a good answer for it. Yeah. No, it's a common problem. I know.
Last question? Good?
All right, thank you very much.